Hey everybody, thanks for joining me again today. We're going to step away from the blood and guts of the Greek battlefield and the intrigue of Greek politics and take a look at a bit more of a subtle subject, and that's the Greek mind. Today we're going to look at Greek philosophy and some of the great Greek philosophers and the impact that they've had on our world today. So we'll look at the essential questions. For the Greeks, what is philosophy? So we'll define that. For the Greeks, what is philosophy? What does it mean? And as far as the power of the mind, what did the Greeks believe about the capabilities of the human mind, and how does that then shape their beliefs and their studies of the world around them? So we'll take a look at that. And you can't talk Greek philosophy without discussing some of the great Greek philosophers. So we're going to meet some of these great philosophers of ancient Greece. Who are some of these great philosophers? What are their accomplishments? And how do those accomplishments impact us in the present day? And the folks we look at are by no means a list of every great Greek philosopher, but I'm just trying to narrow it down to some of the ones that are going to be more impactful and meaningful to us specifically. We'll meet a guy by the name of Socrates, who is very much the father of these great Greek philosophers. We'll meet his student, Plato, Plato's student, Aristotle. Then we'll look at some folks who are famous in more specific areas, Herodotus and Thucydides, who I'm a little biased towards them, have a little bit of affinity towards those guys. You'll find out why. Hippocrates, and then what I'm sure will be everyone's favorite, because he's a big guy in everyone's favorite subject, and that's a guy by the name of Pythagoras. If you don't know him yet from this favorite subject of yours, you will by the time that we are finished. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. So for the Greeks, they believe in the absolute power of the human mind. They really believe, they really feel that the human mind is capable of understanding anything in the world around it. There's no puzzle, no riddle, no equation, no problem that the human mind cannot solve if it applies logic and reasoning. And many Greeks sought an understanding of the world around them with a fiery passion. And these Greek thinkers who sought wisdom and truth in the world around them were referred to as philosophers. So that's in the Greek mind what a philosopher is, someone who seeks wisdom and truth and knowledge of the world. That's a philosopher. And so this act of seeking wisdom and truth of the world around you is what the Greeks called philosophy. And the Greek philosophers are going to lay the foundation for many of the subjects and fields that we still study today. Fields like history, science, biology, political science, and logic were all pioneered in many ways by the ancient Greeks and their philosophers and their study of philosophy. Now in the 400s BC, the first of these Greek philosophers were people called sophists. Sophists are just teachers, basically. Sophists were teachers who traveled throughout the Greek world, and they tried to get themselves hired out to tutor the sons of wealthy individuals. These sophists claimed that they could teach all knowledge to anyone, and they believed in a concept that was called relative truth. Relative truth basically means that the truth about the world, knowledge about the world, can be different for each individual, since each individual person sees the world differently. So, for example, person A thinks that a circle is a square, and person B thinks that a square is a circle. Well, a sophist would say, gosh, you think a circle is a square? If you believe that that is true, then that is true to you. That's truth in the world. And if you believe a square is a circle, and that's truth to you, then in your mind, that's true. And frankly, that's kind of silly. Now, I'm going a little extreme in the example there, but I think you get the point. Well, the first truly great philosopher of ancient Greece, a guy by the name of Socrates, is a major critic of the sophists and relative truth. He believes this idea of relative truth is hogwash, that there is truth in the world. There is right and there is wrong. A circle is a circle, and a square, no matter who you are. Socrates, who was born in Athens around 470 BC, believes in a concept that he calls absolute truth, or the idea that truth is universal. It's the same for everyone in society. And like the sophists, Socrates was a teacher. He tutored the youth of Athens. And he used a teaching method that he pioneered, something that today we call the Socratic method, in order to teach his students how to discover this absolute truth about the world. Now, you may have used the Socratic method. It's used in a lot of schools, in a lot of classrooms, by a lot of teachers. In the classical sense, the Socratic method worked by Socrates asking his students a question. And it was always an open-ended question that had no clear right or wrong answer. And then no matter what the student said, he never gave them an answer. Instead, he always responded with another question. And if they answered that, with another question and another. It's the constant game of, yeah, what if this? Yeah, what if that? He's always opposing their answer, no matter what, with a clear and logical argument to try to get them to clarify their thinking. It was all about teaching them how to think for themselves, how to find truth in the world for themselves. It's not about, here's this knowledge, learn it and regurgitate it, but it's how do you find truth and knowledge in the world. And apparently his teaching methods worked really, really well, because under Socrates' teaching, the youth of Athens began to question everything in the world around them. Things like the Athenian government, the decisions the government was making, its policies. They began to question Greek religion, the existence of the gods. And all this is fine and dandy, but it's taking place during the Peloponnesian War, a time in which unity is necessary in Athens. And so the leaders began seeing Socrates as a threat, because his teachings are making people question the polis and question the government. And so Socrates and his teachings become sort of a threat to the polis. And as a result, Socrates is arrested. And he's put on trial. He's charged with the crime of corrupting the young. Yes, apparently teaching young people to think for themselves is corrupting them. It's a crime, at least during these circumstances. Anyway, Socrates defended himself in court. He is nonetheless found guilty, and his sentence was death. Socrates chose to carry out his own death sentence, his own execution, by drinking a poison that he mixed from the hemlock plant. And there in his home, surrounded by his family, his friends, and his most beloved friends, his students, he drank the poison and died. Now, among those at Socrates' bedside at his death was Socrates' greatest student, a young man by the name of Plato. And for Plato, Socrates wasn't just a teacher. He was a father figure. He was a friend. He was a mentor. And he really took Socrates' death very hard. And upon the death of his beloved teacher, Plato left Athens. He left Athens and he traveled the Greek world for a time, trying to find himself, trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. Well, when he finally returned from his travels, he had made a decision. He decided that he wanted to follow in Socrates' footsteps and teach, just like his mentor had done. And so he opened up his own school, a school where he could teach students just like Socrates had taught him. Plato's school, called the Academy, would remain in Athens, would remain open, and continue to teach the future leaders and philosophers of Greece, of the Mediterranean, of the ancient world for the next 900 years. Think about that. That's 9 centuries. You think Seckman's still going to be here in 900 years? Well, I hope so. I don't know if it will be. Sure, I hope so. But 900 years, boy, that's a long time to be influencing minds and philosophers and leaders. Now, during his life, Plato is going to write numerous books. This is very common of great philosophers at the time. It was no different for Plato, and he wrote on a multitude of topics. But his most famous book was a book called The Republic. The Republic was the world's first ever political science book. Now, what is political science? Political science is the scientific study of politics and government. So I kind of like it. It's pretty cool stuff. And what the book did was it examined Plato's thoughts on what the ideal society and government would be. And in his book, what he does is he outlines what he sees as being 4 basic principles that make a good society and a good government. We're going to break each of these down in class and discuss them at length, but I just want to zip through them really quick here in the screencast. First thing Plato believes is that the state is always more important than the individual. Okay? The well-being of the state is much more important than the individual rights and freedoms of any citizen. Secondly, that is really kind of connected to the first, each person should place service to the community, service to the state above their own personal goals. Third, giving people too much freedom creates social disorder. And fourth, and this is really one of the most controversial ones, only the most intelligent and best educated citizens should be allowed to participate in government. That one makes for a good discussion. We'll talk about it in class. Now, the book shows that even though he was from Athens, Plato was not a big fan of the Athenian democracy. As a matter of fact, the book shows that Plato strongly disliked the Athenian democracy. He actually liked the Spartan system much, much better. Kind of ironic considering that the two countries were at odds with one another in the midst of the Peloponnesian War at the time. Now, the next great philosopher was one of Plato's students, a guy by the name of Aristotle, who really is widely considered the greatest of all the Greek philosophers, learned at the right hand of Plato. And like his mentor, he wrote a multitude of books on a variety of topics. And he's so influential that a lot of these books provided the basis of Western thought on these topics well into the Middle Ages. Deep into the Middle Ages, people were looking to Aristotle for knowledge on biology, for knowledge on astronomy. Now, he also developed his own method of finding truth. Socrates had the Socratic method. Aristotle developed something called the syllogism. A syllogism is just it's a line of reasoning to kind of try to find out what is true, to determine if a conclusion that follows is logical. So an example might be, all Greeks are human. Aristotle is a Greek, therefore Aristotle is human. Or something that might be more contemporary to us. The Dallas Cowboys always choke and lose in big games. Tony Romo plays for the Dallas Cowboys, therefore Tony Romo always chokes and loses in big games. Sorry to the Cowboys fans, it just seemed appropriate there. Now, also like Plato, Aristotle was a great teacher, and among his students is none other than the famous ancient world conqueror Alexander the Great, a guy that we're going to meet and get to know a little bit better not too far from now. I kind of want to take a look now at some folks who are famous in just specific areas of philosophy. And I have to say I'm a little bit biased towards these two gentlemen here, Herodotus and Thucydides, because you see, these are two philosophers who pioneered the study of history. Yes, love these guys. And I thank them very much, because without them, I wouldn't have a job. So thank you, Herodotus and Thucydides, for allowing me to make money and provide for my family. I appreciate it. Really, I do. These guys wrote of events, not just to catalog and glorify what happened, like ancient kings of the past had done, but their purpose was to study, to analyze, to learn from these events, to see what they could teach us. Herodotus, who came first, is considered to be the father of history, because he wrote about the Persian Wars, and later on, Thucydides wrote about the Peloponnesian War. Beyond them, we have a very famous Greek doctor, a guy called Hippocrates, who is considered to be the father of modern medicine. He's really the first doctor, if you even want to call people that back then, who believed that diseases had natural causes, things that occurred in nature, that people didn't get sick because they were being cursed by the gods, but instead something natural made you sick, and therefore you could treat it like something natural. He diagnosed and treated illnesses based on observations. He kept meticulous records, the diseases he had seen, their symptoms, and the way that he treated them. And he tried to communicate this to other doctors to improve patient care. And he strongly recommended something that your doctor probably tells you when you go to see him. He strongly recommended that the way to stay healthy was good hygiene, stay clean, good diet, eat healthy, and get plenty of rest. Not a new idea originating from the great Greek doctor Hippocrates. But I gotta save what, aside from the historians, would be the best for last, because I know that everyone's favorite subject is math. And if you love math, then you love this guy. Pythagoras. Pythagoras is a great Greek mathematician, and the Greeks themselves believed that through the study of math you could find absolute truth and knowledge. Because, hey, numbers don't lie, right? No matter where you go, numbers are truth. The numbers are the same. 2 plus 2 is always 4. 1 plus 1 is always 2, whether you're in China, Canada, Greece, or America. And you probably know what Pythagoras is famous for, a wonderful little algebraic formula that has to do with the sides of a right triangle. Yes, the Pythagorean theorem, which students around the world, around the country, right here at Seckman, still learn in their math classes in the present day. So thank you, Pythagoras, for making math awesome, and I'm sure everyone loves the subject and thanks you every day because of it. Well, that kind of brings us to a close on our Greek philosophers here, but what did we look at today? We examined what philosophy is to the Greeks, and we looked at what the Greeks thought the human mind was capable of and how this influenced the way they studied and looked at the world. And then we specifically got into some of these philosophers, guys like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Herodotus and Thucydides, Hippocrates and Pythagoras, and we examined who they were, what their accomplishments are, and how they still impact us today. So the next time that we meet, be ready to discuss each of these topics. And as always, until then, I bid you farewell.